Hey, we're live.
We are.
Woo!
Oh wait, is this now recording for?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So again, this week was all just everyone looking at everything.
Wait, who here read Wonder and who read Rules?
I read Wonder.
Okay, I read Rules. Cool.
I read Rules.
I read Wonder.
Oh wow, again.
Half and half.
Look at us go. And it's the same people read the same thing. That's funny.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It is. Well, Hannah, what did you think of Wonder?
I really, really liked it. It was like it's for, younger. So it was harder for me to get into it at first. Like I don't know. It was like kind of like slow for me, but that was just the style of the book to kind of like have it be just all about fifth grade. And I mean, I related a lot to it from like my own experience and like going into middle school and everything, which I talked about in my mirror. But I ended up really liking it by the end, or like as it started to kind of like progress into a story, and like Augie started to gain friends and everything, and that was like really great, and seeing how he accepted that and wasn't like just pushing everyone away and everything. So I don't know. I really liked it overall. It was a really good feel book, especially by the end. What did you think of it?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Are you talking now?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
Can you guys hear me still?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-mm.
No.
Can you guys hear me still? Am I frozen?
I mean,
I'm going to restart my computer because it's not No?
I mean, we can hear you right now.
yeah.
I think she just has a lot of lag between when she's actually talking and when we hear it.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Oh. I'm restarting the computer.
Okay, well then Corey and I can talk about
Rules.
Rules. Yeah. What did you think?
I really, really enjoyed it. I thought that, again, like Hannah was saying about Wonder, definitely written for a younger audience, and so it took me a couple chapters to be like, okay, like I have to kind of get into that mindset. But I think that even though it was written for a younger audience, it still handled its topic in a really like mature and respectful manner, while like acknowledging the real experiences of Catherine and her frustrations and trying to make David and Jason well-rounded characters.
Yeah, I think they did a good job. I don't know. I think Jason definitely became his own character. I think David was still a little like, I don't know, maybe that's how it was supposed to be portrayed, but like I feel like David wasn't quite his own yet. It was more like the way that she saw him.
What was the book about?
It's about, right, because we kind of all know what Wonder's about.
Yeah.
Rules was about the main character is a girl named Catherine, and she has a brother with autism.
Okay.
And it's just kind of about all these rules that she makes to like try to make David appear more normal to other people so that people don't think of him as weird and like judge him. Because like for her, it's like kind of a mixture of she doesn't want people to look at him and like judge him because she loves him, but then at the same time she doesn't want them to like put that on her either. Like it's kind of embarrassing for her. But she makes these rules like no opening doors at other people's houses, or like no screaming, or just stuff like that.
Right.
And then she goes to his occupational therapy with him and meets this other boy who, do we know what he has, Corey? He's in a wheelchair and he can't talk.
I mean, my best
I don't know if
guess
they
was
said,
cerebral palsy, but
that's
I
what I was
don't think
thinking
they
too.
ever actually name it. So,
Yeah.
he has
So she
some
meets that boy.
disability.
Yeah, and then they become friends, and she starts making like pictures for cards because he has like a book with cards in it that he can point to talk to people. And then there's also this next door neighbor girl that just moves in. She really, really wants to be friends with her because she really wants to have a friend in the neighborhood. But I don't know. She kind of has to like change who she is and act differently to get along with her. And she always feels like weird about David, her brother. And like the girl invites her to this dance and is like, oh, you should bring that boy that you drew. She drew a picture of Jason, the guy in the wheelchair. And then she's like really embarrassed about it and didn't want to bring him because she didn't tell the girl that he was in a wheelchair and that he had whatever he had. And then it just gets kind of awkward at the end because then Jason gets mad at her for not wanting to go to the dance with him, and then she decides, okay, that's stupid, I shouldn't care what people think, and that's unfair to them. And she brings him, and then the girl next door is like, oh, what the, and like gets mad at her because she didn't tell her that the guy was in a wheelchair. I don't really understand the ending. The ending's just kind of like she's friends with Jason and not with the girl.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Have either of you read Wonder?
No,
but I know a lot about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty familiar with the plot, especially with the movie coming out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I've seen that commercial a lot.
That kind of reminded me of like kind of how towards the end of the book there's a similar situation, and that so like throughout the book it's laid out like based off of like someone's perspective. So like it goes from August's perspective to his friend Jack's perspective to his sister's perspective, like talking through like each section. And is Abby on? Maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Cool.
okay.
Yay. Okay. But it's coming.
Perfect. I'm just talking about
Go on.
how Wonder is similar to Rules. So, anyway, so it was interesting because Olivia is August's sister, and she's like tired of like her, like she ends up going to a new high school like where all the kids don't really know August, and so she like wanted to keep it that way because for all of her life like everyone knew her as like having August as her brother. And so it was just interesting because she was like in this play and like didn't want him to be there because she didn't want anyone to know that that was her brother. But then it like switches over to like her old friend who she's no longer friends with, Miranda. And Miranda, like she like brags that August, she like lies and like brags at a camp that August is her brother to gain popularity. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting how they both like saw it so differently. Like Olivia, his sister, who is like actually, you know, her sister of August, like she feels like kind of the way that who's the main character in Rules, or the Catherine, the way Catherine feels about the whole situation. And then Miranda, the friend of Olivia's, is like, no, I like really like August. I want everyone to know that I'm like friends with him and everything. So I don't really know what or how that's supposed to represent maybe something bigger, but it was just interesting to hear that that was something similar in your guys' book as well.
It might have something to do with that stereotype that we read about a bit that addresses sympathy.
Part of wonder that.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I thought I waited long enough to let Abby join.
Abby, can you hear us?
Oh no.
Maybe, oh wait, you guys aren't together. Maybe Abby needs to FaceTime in.
Well,
Oh yeah, like we did with Tristan last time.
Yeah.
Abby, when you were just on video, or no, I mean just on sound, it was pretty clear. Yeah.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Ooh, there you go.
All right. Well, I'll just keep video off and.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay, keep going, Corey.
Okay, lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the stereotype about sympathy. So, I think that, what was her name? Miranda, that character was maybe kind of, there to point out that stereotype that a lot of people sometimes view people with disabilities as just like objects of sympathy and like, oh, that's really sucky. I'm sorry. I'll be extra nice to you because that's sucky. But really, that's like not what they want and not what they need to be able to interact with others in a healthy way.
Lena, can you bring my vitamin water? No. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Miranda, she like grew up knowing August, so like a lot of characters in the book, like as they like got to know August for who he was and all his other like characters to him, a lot like the theme for like what they always would say was like they would kind of like forget about his face and like they didn't really like they'd always say, oh, it's really not that bad once you like spend more time with him, like you start to notice it less and everything. And so I don't know if like that's just kind of where Miranda was since she had known him since she was like 6 years old or something. But I don't know.
I think it goes with like how Corey was saying about the over sympathizing. It's just more of like finding the like human characteristics and like human qualities that we do with people who don't have disabilities. And then like those kind of get lost when people look at like kids or just individuals with disabilities. And so like I think I talked about that, just how it's important to realize those, because it's like once in the book, like once they got past like being uncomfortable with August's face, like then his human, emotions, thoughts, ideas, all that kind of stuff were more present in the book. And
for sure.
Another interesting thing of the book that I thought was how it was all, there wasn't any adult perspectives in it.
Yeah. No,
and I was just like curious why the author did that. Like, and like if they did include a adult's perspective, like how that would change the dynamic of the book.
Yeah, I feel like just because it's written for such like a younger audience, like maybe the author like chose not to, because I feel like kids entering middle school, they don't really care to hear what their parents have to say, and so like that perspective wouldn't matter as much. Like to us, it would be interesting, because we want to know like what hardships or happy things that the parents are going through. But for kids, they probably just want to hear like, oh, well, what's August's friend think? What does his sister think? What does his sister's boyfriend think of him? All that. So
were the parents' voices still present though?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, definitely. Like,
but from the perspective of what always the
Mhm.
child, so.
yeah, but it was also like, I mean, him, like August and his mom had like a really strong connection, and like he really, like, when he was at home, kind of was like very protected, and was her baby in a sense. And like towards the end of the book, he kind of wanted to get away from that. Like he could tuck himself in at night by himself and stuff like that. But and interesting, like they're still there. It wasn't like one of those chapter books that the parents just disappear all of a sudden. And the kids rule it, but like his dad and his mom and the principal and the teachers and stuff were still there, just not from their perspective. So
I asked that because in our book Rules, Catherine's mom was often the voice that was kind of pointing out when Catherine was behaving disrespectfully.
Do you guys want to start talking about the videos, or?
Corey's talking.
I guess there's still lag.
No.
Corey, keep going.
It's doing that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I just felt like Catherine's mom was the one who, whenever Catherine was being especially unfair to her brother, her mom would be like, hey, I know you're trying to help out, but you're also like, look at this way that you're hurting him. And then both the mom and the dad like definitely weren't perfect people. Like there were things about the bullying that the mom didn't know, and so she was like, oh no, he should be friends with Ryan.
Yeah.
And her dad was like, always running late and stuff, but still really loved his children. So I thought that was just really interesting to see that they kind of put the parent in the role of almost like Catherine's conscience. And I mean, she had her own like conscience in her thoughts, but also like her mom was there to keep her in check.
I found it interesting when there was times with like Christy, the next door neighbor, like the time when they're dancing in the room or whatever, and Christy doesn't see like how oh my gosh, what's the main girl's name? Catherine. How Catherine didn't want her to put on music for David to dance because it was like she knew it was going to be a mess and he was going to step on things and it was embarrassing for her. But then Christy was like, I don't understand why you have a problem with us dancing. We're just dancing. And so I thought that was interesting, like how Christy saw him versus how Catherine saw him too. Kind of like what they were talking about with the other characters in Wonder.
Yeah, Olivia and Miranda.
And it's kind of like the sibling versus the friend. Like the friend who doesn't have to live with them all the time and like have that, but then like the sibling who feels like it's like whatever people think about them is also going to be put on, like think about their sibling is also going to be put onto them, I think.
Yeah.
Is Abby here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh,
okay, good.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why it keeps doing that. And like I can hear it on my end when it's about to lag, like after I talk. And so it's really, I don't know why it's doing that. But
do we want to talk at all about like the article on evaluating those children's books and like the findings and
the Microsoft document one?
Yeah.
Sure.
That was part of one of our modules last week, right? I'm not crazy.
Yeah, I was reading it and I was like, I definitely read this last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it the same one?
Oh.
Oh.
Maybe it was an accident. Because last week it didn't really like fit.
Yeah.
That's true. Now that you say that, I remember.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this doesn't. I wouldn't say that gender makes someone with special needs or anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
But I wasn't like reading it again. I like wasn't surprised by like what the findings found, or the study found, with how teachers don't have special needs books books that have students with disabilities in it and
Unless
stuff
you
like
have
that.
unless you have a student with disability.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I was
And I
in.
thought it was interesting too. Like, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I was in a classroom for one of my practicums, like one of the ones that I go to a lot. I forget which class. And there was a student with a disability, and she, it was very interesting the way that they had it because she was integrated into the classroom most of the day, except she had I don't know what they are called, someone who was with her all the time, always.
Oh, like an aide?
Yeah, an aide, who was always there in the classroom as well. And so she was integrated, but also not, because like she could kind of do what she wanted. Like if everyone was sitting at the carpet, she didn't necessarily have to also sit at the carpet, but everyone was always welcome, like always welcomed her to be there. And like I could see the way that the teacher had to kind of like she had to teach the other kids in the class a lot on how to interact with her. And by the end of the year, because I was there for a long time, but by the end, like after being there longer, I could see how much the other kids in the class had grown and like how they treated her so much differently than when I first got there. Like at first they were really like, oh, like what is she doing? Why does she get to do that and we don't? Like why? Like all that. And then by the end they were really like, oh, like I don't know how to explain it, but the kids learned a lot, and I think that was something important that I noticed in our reading is that the like having integrated students with disability is like really effective in teaching the other kids as well. I think that's from a different article, but
Still, that's good.
No, I actually wrote about that in my post too. There was like one line in the article. It said, oh yeah, by the time children encounter people with disabilities in their communities, they may already have integrated negative stereotypes and prejudices and may display fear or uneasiness. Introducing young children to literature with diverse and textured depictions of people with disabilities can help to offset these social prejudices. And that, yeah, same as you, made me think about, well, it's not just the books, it's like actually having students with disabilities integrated in the classroom too. So I wrote about that a bit.
Yeah. Can you guys still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Are you talking?
Cool. No, not right now.
Oh, okay.
It was just doing this. It was just doing this fuzzy thing, so I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't lagging too much.
But the article about like choose books that and don't avoid books that. What I found really interesting about the avoid books that part is where at the beginning it said that having one of these doesn't necessarily make it not a good option. It's the mixture of a few of these, and I thought that was really helpful in like thinking about all the other books that we've analyzed, because I feel like there's been so many times where I'm like, oh, well, this book is really good, but it has this one little thing from this one reading about evaluating, so does that like make this entire book no longer like a good option? And I think that that little section right before I started reading about this one, like books to avoid, was helpful because it made me realize that it's not necessarily like this one thing makes this book no longer a good option. Where did Hannah go?
I don't know.
She just messaged the group and said that she froze.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Man, this is not the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, something that I liked about that list that bulleted lists was that because I read the avoid books that and then choose books that like I read those first without, I just was like skimming them, and I didn't read that small little paragraph above it. And as I was reading the avoid books that, I was like, oh my gosh, like wonder is like in a book that you have to avoid. And I got like, not like upset about it, but just kind of like I was confused by that because it was like, what?
Which part of avoid books that does Wonder have in them?
It was more of like the focusing so much on the disability and like like how the character was kind of defined by his, and not that he was, but there were characteristics throughout the book that he was, that was the focus. I mean, the whole book was written because of his disability. And so as I was reading that, I was like, what? Like that, I can't believe that fits in this category. But then, reading the choose books that it was like, okay, well, all like, wonder fits into mostly all of these bulleted points. And then I went back and read that paragraph. So I think it was just, I don't know, it was important in realization of like that combination, like you said, of, just because it has one aspect doesn't mean that it's a bad book.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it's just like, then there's like that fine balance of like, well, how, like, is it just like, if you have one of those bulleted points, then is that okay? But if you have more than that,
for
then it's
good
like,
or for bad?
For bad.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think the exact, like, I want to see what it says exactly. It said that by itself, the occurrence of one of these elements in a story does not necessarily mean that people with disabilities are misrepresented. It is the combination of these characteristics and how the characters function in the story overall, to which a character with a disability might have been stereotyped. So you really do also have to just read it and see how the character is portrayed. Like,
right.
And Augie, obviously, like, at least from what I've heard and what I've seen on the commercials for the movies, Augie seems to be portrayed as like his own person and his own character, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I think it definitely is like a great book that fits underneath all the like a lot of the bulleted points for like the good side of it. I think that you could probably argue a couple of the bulleted points, but I think it, since it fits so well and it just is like such a great overall story that it's good. It just was like that realization of like, oh my gosh, like what is this book? Yeah, I just, going from, I love this book so much, I think it's so great, can't wait to have it in my classroom, to like reading like, oh, well, it does have some characteristics of like avoid books.
Yeah, maybe just talk about those, kind of like what we said.
Right. Do you guys want to talk about the videos that we watched?
Sure.
What do you think about the Carly's Cafe?
It was interesting. How did they...
Have you heard of it before?
No, I haven't. That was the first time I've seen it or heard of it. Have you heard about it before?
No.
Okay.
I watched it before because in SPED I did my whole presentation on autism, and I don't know if any of you know JD Schmidt, but
yeah.
And so she had already gotten anything from this class or something, and so we included it in our presentation. But like, it's been interesting watching it then from like a critical lens and like how it is good or bad, and just kind of relating it back to theme and wonder and like what seems to be in rules. Also, like if you get to know a person who has a disability or special needs, they have more to them other than that, to identify them as that. And showed how Carly had still her own opinion on what she wanted, but like, I don't know that if that was her dad, didn't like even give her a choice. And so it just like makes me wonder if that's the case for a lot of people with special needs, where like they like caregiver is or whatever, it doesn't like take the time to like see that they have their own opinions and thoughts, and like there's I don't know if they open up the freedom for them to have that,
Well,
express that.
I think too that one of the articles said this, that a lot of caregivers and parents and people in general never see student or kids with special needs or with disabilities ever as like being grown up. Like they're forever in their head young.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I totally my stepsister, she has, well, we don't really know exactly what she has, like a little bit of autism, maybe some other stuff too. So I've grown up a lot of spending a lot of time with kids with disabilities and special needs just because of going to like her Special Olympics soccer stuff and basketball stuff and her friends being over and all that. And it's always been like that, like the way people treat them is very young. And even though I'm 2 years younger than her, I've always felt older than her. You know, so I think it's hard for people to like think that they have their own thoughts and opinions, because we sometimes forget that young kids have their own thoughts and opinions. Like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, they just express it differently. And yeah, I thought the interview with her on that like doctor show or whatever it was really cool, how the doctor would ask the question and then she had like already typed out the answer, and the answer was just, you know, amazing for each of the questions. And so I thought that was a really awesome way for, you know, her to communicate on such a public stage and everything, and just like, you know, make others aware of her thoughts and ideas and kind of speak for the general population of you know, just individuals in general with disabilities. And
the thing is, it's so different though for all of them, I think. Like,
right.
For instance, she is one, I don't want to say anything like incorrectly, but she is one of the people who have autism who can't like express on the outside exactly what they're feeling and thinking and say it, but in their head have so much to say and stuff. But then like my sister, it can express what she wants to say like fine, like really well, but everything that she does say is really like young and simple a lot of the time. Like she doesn't have, or at least I don't know, because she can talk so well and express herself so well, she doesn't seem to have that deep of thoughts like Carly does.
Okay, gotcha.
But she also is not just only autistic. Like she has other stuff too, so that might have a play.
I just thought it was really, I think like, you know, all educators should be exposed to, just because it's, you know, it shows that ability to have, you know, or just not even ability, just like the fact that, you know, all humans can form like critical thoughts of, you know, what they think and how they view the world and how others view them and everything. And so I think that also goes along with including Samuel too.
I've seen that whole movie.
Yeah, I think we watched it in sped.
Yeah. Were we in the same sped?
I think so. I know Corey and I were.
Yeah.
Were you in the same one with Kellen?
Probably.
Okay, well, I was in that one. I think we were all in the same one. Okay, anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of what we talked, like what we read and watched and stuff this week reminded me a lot of that SPED class, just because it was more of like a general overview of incorporating, you know, literature and just like your way of teaching students with disabilities. Just, I think like it's such a point of transition, you know, 20 years or so of inclusion, that we're still in the midst of that, and it's still controversial for some people. that I think it's just really important that we have a good grasp of how we're going to handle that as teachers. And I think including Samuel was a good video for that, or, you know, the movie is really good for that idea.
For sure. Did you any of you watch the comedian with
cerebral palsy?
Yeah. That was
She was really funny.
She was super funny, and I was just like thinking about one thing that like stood out to me that she brought up was this is kind of heading in a different direction, but how she just made a point about how in Hollywood movies and like the Wonder movie coming up, like how like no one is ever like actually special needs, and like how she experienced that firsthand in college when she tried out for a part that she didn't like get the part, even though it was someone about cerebral palsy, and she was like, okay, well I have it, so I feel like I fit the part well, and
and then they're like, oh well, she like you wouldn't be able to do the stunts, and she's like, well then neither would the character, like
no, that just like stood out to me, and it made me wonder, like, wonder about Wonder. The movie coming up, it'll be interesting to watch it and see what Hollywood does with it. And
have you not seen the trailer for it?
No.
Oh.
I haven't.
Well, it's in there.
It's in what?
I mean, like they show his face.
Oh
in the
yeah.
trailer.
And is it like based off of someone true? I don't know. Like, I don't know if they would have had the opportunity to, you know, find someone with like a situation like that, or I don't know.
But they picked from multiple situations where there's, you know, families with a child with a disability, and maybe not this particular one, but
right.
Just like that family dynamic. And
yeah.
The Hollywood thing, though, reminds me specifically of, like, I don't know if you guys seen the movie What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
No.
No? Okay. Well, it's young Leonardo DiCaprio plays a kid with autism.
Oh.
And it's very interesting because, like, he plays it extremely well. Like, he plays that part super well. But then after I read that or watched that video that the lady was talking about that, I was like, okay, well, he doesn't have it. Like, he's not autistic. Yeah. And I don't know, it's weird to think about that. Like how, or like, what's that movie with Stephen Hawking? What's his place? Plays Stephen Hawking. Yeah, Theory of Everything. Thank you. Basically, yes, it's very true that they do that with actors, and it's weird. I don't know.
It kind of makes me wonder, like, why, you know, because we've talked so much about, you know, what about the author? Like, where is the author? Like, how does this author have kind of like the right to express these ideas through this book or something like that? You know, do they have that proper experience? Like, and it makes me wonder whether or not, you know, the reason why literature or movies for that matter too, like why there's such a limited amount with kids with disabilities is because like people with disabilities are not necessarily like capable of writing a book. Not saying that like they aren't, just like that it doesn't happen. Or if it's just like this whole inclusion like transition still of like it hasn't really affected how much literature is in the class. Like, does that make sense? Like, it's
yeah.
Like Carly could write a book, or did Carly write a book?
Right. Like, I think that like there's people like with disabilities that, you know, can write books, but is it the fact that like, you know, publishers won't publish it, or
that they're just not doing it?
Right, or they're just not doing it, or is it that like schools and like, you know, classrooms and teachers have not incorporated that or taken the time to consider the positivities of that.
Well, I don't think that there are very many books in general.
Comparatively to
Comparatively,
other, yeah, I agree.
Especially the ones that are written, I don't think are written by people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a very rare occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of makes me think because, because like in I don't remember, like, is it 90s or something like that, that kids could actually be included in like a regular classroom with disabilities.
I don't
remember when that, but it hasn't been that long. And
Right.
so it's just like, that opportunity, like that separation hasn't necessarily deteriorated.
Yeah, definitely not.
So
if it's okay, I wrote down that as a meta question, just on like where, like, because like I don't know that we're the ability to like get people with special needs to write books about their life and experience, like that might not be their passion or like desire to do that, or maybe they aren't able to. And so Nami on where are authors like able to, I wrote, when does the author have the right to write about like these experiences and like write children's books? Like, is it have to be based off of like a long lifespan?
Like, does it have to be from that first person? I mean, because that's what we've been saying for the other books about culture, like that, if you're going to write a book about, African Americans or something like that, then like the author is better if it's African American because they have that firsthand experience. And so, I don't.
Is it all right if I did that as a question?
Yeah, I think, and just like, because I think we do have the access to it, but like we've talked about, like they're just, a lot of them aren't that good, and maybe we just haven't been exposed to a lot of the good ones. But it's just, it's a challenging idea that we don't really know much about, I guess.
Yeah.
So, another question that I had, and it kind of is more of like the methodology of teaching literature with individuals with disabilities, was just like the how to benefit all students while reading a book like Wonder or something like that, and like what follow-up activities or discussions should be used or completed after reading the book.
Does Wonder have questions at the end?
No.
I can look.
I know some books like this do. Like
yours?
Some of the books on Amazon, I was looking at those that she gave us, like, the best book on Amazon. They had questions at the end for some of them.
Oh, nice.
I don't know.
I don't think there is in Wonder.
I don't know if there is in Rules either.
I just took a peek. It has an about the author and a question and answer, and it talks about how, so we were just talking about, authors of children's books and when do they have the right or enough knowledge to write these books. And I actually read all of this, and the author of Rules, she has a child who has autism, and so she kind of very, very loosely extracted some of her family's experiences and put them in Rules. Like, the characters are all fictional and what they do is all fictional, but there were like just a couple things she talked about how her own son's experiences impacted the way she wrote about David, and then some students that she saw at his occupational therapy also impacted the way she wrote about Jason and the other people in the office.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, in my eyes, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't have a disability, but like, in my eyes, it's okay for someone who is, has a son or daughter, or like is a close relative or something, to pool their experiences and, you know, research more and more, and, you know, talk to other people with those similar experiences and stuff, and kind of base a book off of that and write it like through the eyes of the person with a disability. Like, that seems okay because it's more focused on them, I guess. I don't know, maybe that's not what I meant to say, but like, do you guys know what I'm trying to say? Like, they're trying to,
Yes.
like, all their research is coming from their firsthand experiences, even though they're not experiencing the disability itself, but they're like
And
trying to.
I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how like some of the other cultural books are too. Like they like went and spent a lot of time with a certain culture and researched them a lot and got their stories. And I think it's a little different too, because like the people with disabilities might not always be able to, or not even able to, but it just seems like it's not a common thing for them to write books. Not that they wouldn't be able to if they had the resources and the help, but it's just not a common thing, it doesn't seem like. So having other people do it makes sense to me if they've experienced it enough and like spent a lot of time with those people. And I think my mom could write a book about it. She raised my sister since she's been a baby. Like, she's been there the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just kind of going back to like the kind of teaching part of it is just, you know, I feel like I was thinking about, you know, that I would love to read this book in my future classroom, or like, you know, read it as a class or, you know, something like that. But then thinking about like, well, what, you know, what part of that book would I want like the main message to be from? And like, you know, I kind of like thought about like for Wonder, it would be like the kindness and, you know, accepting, yeah, like that type of thing. And but I just didn't know, you know, it's like, is that always what you talk about? It just seems like, you know, with other books you can go beyond just kindness and stuff. You can I just think, I mean, for that specific book it's a big theme, but I think just the methodology part of teaching something that you don't have experience with. And then, you know, then it's like, well, what if you do have a student with a disability? You don't want to target them either. For like, tell us your experience.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, it's hard to like what kind of discussions to facilitate that are, you know, okay, and that you are not going to point out anyone.
Yeah, and that's like a super, super broad question that I don't really think has a specific answer to, because it depends on like the grade and the situation, and you know, there's so many factors. But it's just kind of like a general wondering of like what should be done in this time. If you get, whatever is fine. I don't know if that's like an interest to you guys too, but
well, yeah.
It just, I don't know if there's like a really, like, we could get it and like an answer to it. It's just more of like we'll maybe figure it out as we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think to like narrow it down at least a little, to make a muddy question out of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like what you're kind of asking is, what are some ways that we can discern other themes from children's literature that features people with disabilities, and like how can we, when we find those themes, how can we discuss them with the class, I guess? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, because I think, you know, a lot of it is like, you do want to address the fact that, like, you know, how are you going to act and how are you going to view individuals with stereotypes? But it's also just, you know, you don't want to just focus on the person with a disability, because there's so much more. There's that human characteristics part of, you know, treating others with kindness. And, you know, there's more than just like the disability and how you're going to act when you're, you know, faced with someone with a disability. And so I guess just having that balance of
Yeah, I mentioned this in my post about how by the end of reading Wonder, like I started, just like all the friends and everyone, started to kind of, you know, forget about, like, it wasn't like highlighted, like, and I felt like in the beginning, like that's pretty much a lot of what was talked about and thought about with like Augie, and like how this was like the struggle he was going through. But like as time went on, it like transitioned more to just like him and his experiences in school, just like all the other kids, and like all the problems that, I mean, his problems were different in a way, like people were like isolating from him, but in a way that also is a problem in middle schools in general with like all that sort of thing. And so by the end of the book, I like noticed that I wasn't really thinking any, or not as much as the beginning, about like his what was wrong with his face. Like I didn't think about that as much anymore. I just thought about like for who he was. And so I feel like there's definitely a lot of room, if we're looking at Wonder specifically, to like discuss other things other than, you know, like the hardships that he went through.
Augie doesn't have any type of mental disability, right? It's just his face.
Right.
I know, so I don't want to call, like, I don't know what to say.
I don't. That's the only thing that I don't understand about this book is like, okay, his face is
right, because he's completely normal
but,
on everything. Like he is super smart, and that was another thing that I just thought of too, is like how in the book towards the end, like during the 5th grade graduation ceremony, and like they like give him an award for his like bravery and like going into middle school and with like his condition. And like interesting, and like it even like talks about how he's like, well, I don't know why I deserve this, because every 5th grader is going through a lot when they go into middle school and like have to experience bravery as well, but why aren't they all getting
I just think that if I was a person with a disability and this was supposed to be a book about that, I would be a little like, okay, well, he doesn't really. Does that make sense? Does what I'm saying make sense? Like, he doesn't. It's just the outside.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's why they did that. Like, I kind of just made that connection while you guys were talking, was that it's kind of like in Our Mother's House. Remember how we were talking about how it's all just like so happy and all that kind of stuff, and that it never really talked about like the struggles of it. Like this book does address the struggles of it, and I think that like as a person without a disability, like we see people with disabilities, all you see is the outside. I think like the main idea of this was that like you just see the outside of August and you know instantly think something else is wrong, and like, you know, I think that was a lot like a big thing for the book. And even though like maybe it doesn't connect with a specific, you know, maybe it doesn't have a mental disability, and so that kid that's in the audience or reading this book is not necessarily going to connect, well, like, oh well, this kid, you know, this character doesn't have what I have. But like I think that they could still connect to it, because, you know, he talks about like the staring or people thinking that he's dumb or just because of how he looks. And, you know, people with disabilities usually, not always, I mean, I don't know what percentage, but like typically maybe look a little bit different. And for a kid, it's like important to, you know, instill that idea of like, well, you know, just because somebody looks different doesn't mean that they think differently or that they, you know, are not as smart as you, or
it can also be the other way too, though, because like I said, I spent a lot of time with kids with or people with disabilities and special needs, and a lot of them don't look like it at all. Like you would not see most of them walking down the street and think that. So then when you interact with them, I think that's a lot really surprising for a lot of people, because they're like, whoa, like that's not what
so
I was
maybe
expecting.
like that's the thing too. Like that's the connection with just like the outside of August, that like that represents that disconnect.
And I think that's kind of how it was in our book, because it didn't really seem like her brother like appeared necessarily from the outside, like he had autism. Because she would like talk about how she wanted him to be normal and how the outside looked normal, but
right. I think it, like just the like a book has to like a book about a student or a person with a disability, you know, it has to like have some realism in a way, but like I mean that disability, whatever is chosen, I think is chosen pretty purposefully for that book. And so, you know, like August's condition, just because it was facial, like I think that represented more than just like a, you know, oh, he has a disability, because it really wasn't a disability. It was just a look. So,
yeah.
So then, is this a good book for disabilities? Or is that a better book just for acceptance?
That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't
like,
know.
I mean, book count as a book on disabilities because he's not disabled.
Well, yeah, he's not technically disabled, but he also has been like disabled in the fact that he hasn't been able to go to school because of all the surgeries that he's had, and so there's like that medical part of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
And so maybe like that's considered the part, but like technically, like if you were to take August as a character and put him against the characters of other books with disabilities, then no, I don't think it would be. But he does interact with society as if he does have a disability, I think.
Yeah. That's true.
So,
and I mean,
I don't know.
He also, like, he was, throughout the book, he was starting to lose his hearing, so then he needed his hearing. He had to get hearing aids, and and so that, I mean, even though that's like kind of a smaller disability, it's still something that like these different hearing aids so that he could keep them in his ears, and like when he lost them at the camp, like that made things a lot more difficult for him. And
right.
There were some, and then like Abby was saying, like the fact that he couldn't go to school, like I mean, in a way, yeah, as a disability, because it was keeping him from like ever having to experience that transition to then having to go to school, and so in its own way. But I think it's definitely a book worth reading. And I guess you could point out to your students like the ways in which he did have a disability, but like also bringing up the fact that like what you see on the outside doesn't mean that like there's more to them, that they're a real person who has, I don't know, that they're ordinary just as much as you are in ways. And so yeah,
I agree.
Feel like a book worth reading for sure. It was good.
Yeah, I think it would be just a good book in general. I mean, maybe this starts out a unit of studying people, different groups of people or something like that. You know, it's just like a good book to start that acceptance and that awareness of that, the fact that people are different than you are, or similar in a lot of ways too. So,
right. What do you guys think about rules?
Well, I think I think that rules did a pretty good job of, again, showing at least Jason as a complete character. I agree with what you were saying earlier, Tristan, that we still definitely see David mostly through his outbursts and not, well, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say.
But one of the things, it's only from Catherine's point of view, like,
yeah, like we never got David's point of view, and I really liked that he and Catherine had the frog and toad thing. Like whenever they were upset with each other, they would just the brother and sister would quote Frog and Toad back to each other.
Oh.
Catherine was Frog and David was Toad, and he like had it memorized. It was
And
like
that's
really
how
sweet.
he kind of like said sorry. Like that was how he would apologize, and her acceptance of his apology would be repeating the phrase back to him, like saying the next line.
Mm.
Yeah, keep going.
Oh, so I was gonna say, like, we were just talking about like how do you pull other themes out of the books. I think one of the big things in Rules was different ways of communicating, because like David and Catherine quote Frog and Toad back to each other, and like there's all this meaning behind it for them. Like Catherine's dad shows his love for David by taking him to the video store almost every day. And like Catherine communicates with Jason through the communication cards that she draws for him, and talking through those. So I think different forms of communication there is really important. I actually connected it to the facilitated communication article that we read.
Oh yeah, the
E-
book key button thing.
So, and it was like talking about how, sometimes people trying to facilitate communication for people with disabilities, they actually are misrepresenting what the people with disabilities are trying to say, because it was talking about how it's like they like steady their hand and help guide them to like point at cards and stuff. And that wasn't happening in Rules, but I did think about the ways that like Jason's mom spoke on behalf of him, like when she went to OT for speech therapy. She would be like, oh, he's having a cranky day today. And then Jason would use the communication cards to tell Catherine, no, I just really wanted to get here to see you. Like, I'm not cranky.
Yeah, and like I like too because Catherine made him cards so he could be like a little more sassy to his mom.
Yeah.
Because like originally, he could only say like yes, no, like simple things, but she made him cards like whatever or one, so that he could like express himself a little better. And like the age that they are, like yeah, at that age they're a little sassy, and she knows that. That's how she expresses herself to her parents. So cards like that. Did Abby leave?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I just had like a buzzing the whole time we've been talking, and now the buzzing's gone. So.
No, I'm here. I'm still here. It's kind of weird without like seeing me, and then.
Yeah, your voice is just somewhere.
Is there anything else that we want to talk about or address from what we read this week?
Really quickly.
I mean, I know. Oh, you go for it, Tristan.
Oh, did you guys watch the video about the like different forms of, or like the communication interaction with his environment, like the video that was like.
Was it the In My Own Language?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I was a little confused.
I guess what I took away from that was just that, just it kind of like went to show again that like we were hearing something that wasn't like English, and so that like initially made me assume like, oh, if we can't understand like just their humming or whatever noises they're making, then they're not
like, saying something.
Then they're not thinking at all like inside their head when really they are. And so like that kind of like that contrast of like the commentary over those noises, like it like made me like realize like the stereotype that I have of like, okay, I might not understand them, but that doesn't mean that they aren't still thinking like thoughts that I might think in my head, like they're just still ordinary in their head. They just can't communicate that out loud to then have us see like them as someone without a special need. And so
I like how he said that like we don't think that he's speaking our language until he like created that voiceover.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like, yeah, when I was first watching, I was like, am I watching the right video? Like, what is happening?
Right, yeah. No, it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, I never like watched anything like that. Sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was gonna say that kind of just brought up a money question for me with, again, in regards to communication. Like the article about facilitated communication was talking about how it shouldn't be practiced anymore because the facilitators were misrepresenting the thoughts of the people with disabilities, and even sometimes like were accidentally creating completely new ideas that weren't really either of theirs. And so, but then with people like the person in who made the video in my own language, like before they learned how to type, there was not really a way for the general population to understand them. Like maybe they had a caretaker who took care of them and kind of learned what some of that language of their own meant and like what some of their signals meant for their needs and wants. But the general population still probably didn't. So for me, the question is like, how much, like, where do you draw the line for like a caretaker overstepping the bounds of speaking on behalf of the person with disabilities?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting.
It's like tricky. That's not.
We could even like, I mean, I feel like depending on how or what the students in our classroom, what their disability is, like some may not have a caretaker with them at all times, and so in a way we might be that caretaker at some points, and so that I feel like that's a good question just for us too as educators, and how we're going to have students in our class with special needs, and we need to know where, I don't know, yeah, where the line is. So I think that's a good question.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
All in favor?
And then I know that's our third muddy question, and we're like at an hour now. But there was,
We're at 1 hour and 7 minutes.
Oh wow, we're over an hour. We're doing awesome.
Yeah.
But before we wrapped up, I wanted to touch on something. So there's like that second part where we each chose something to read or watch after the like first section of videos.
Oh yeah.
And for that one, I kind of chose one that I thought none of us would really choose, partially because like I didn't even know if I wanted to read it at first. It was the article titled, what was it titled? Issues in Sexuality for People with Developmental Disabilities. Oh, you read it too?
I read it.
Yeah, and that's something that's
all of you read it.
That's actually really, that was actually a really prevalent part of my sister's life for a little bit, actually. Like, my mom was really worried about that. So I was like, yeah, I definitely remember hearing about this a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I like chose to read it because it definitely was pushing back against that stereotype that I still carried, that like people with developmental disabilities specifically are often treated as childlike, and that's because there's this assumption that they're not mature enough for some things. But it was like really cool for me to read that article after watching the videos and be like, no, yeah, like even if it's not in our language or something we can observe on the outside, like there's so much going on inside these people's minds, and they still want to be able to express themselves. And I really appreciated. I
was just gonna say, yeah, and like, I mean, it's not something that most people portray on the outside that much anyway. So, like, why should we expect that they would? Like, I don't know.
And the article included like the complete definition of sexuality, even though it was, you know, it wasn't super old, but it's like early 2000s, so it's a little bit older at this point. But but it still included that whole definition of, sexuality isn't just sexual acts. It's like, identifying your gender and who you're attracted to, and developing just relationships with other people and getting to know them. So I thought that was super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to like the idea of, a person with a disability is still a person. Like they still have all of those qualities and characteristics that people without disabilities encounter and experience in life. And, even though their view of the world may be slightly different than ours, like everyone's is different. So,
Yeah.
Reading the part about teaching sexuality to people with disabilities, though, definitely still like made me a little nervous. I was like, oh gosh, like I have no idea, like how, like it said, don't go beyond what's appropriate for the individual, but then thinking about how much communication might be missing if they haven't learned to type or speak yet, then I was like, well, how do I know how much is appropriate? It's like,
Yeah, I mean, what I kind of thought was, I'm probably not going to be teaching that to my students anyway, because I'm going to be teaching younger kids. So, like, even like students in my class that have disabilities at that age, like, why would I teach it to them if I'm not teaching it to the rest of them? Maybe for the older age teachers.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Okay. Are we done? Because I have to go to the bathroom.
Yes.
yeah, I think that covered everything.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Bye.
Nice work, guys.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
I exit.
Okay.
And then you've got all the